Good Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Current podcast. I am Pittsburgh Current editor and publisher Charlie Deitch, and I know it's been a while since we have had a podcast, but there have been a few things going on. And I actually don't know if this is Thursday. In my mind, it's still Tuesday because I haven't been to bed. So we're going to talk about elections. We're going to talk about the craziness that's going on, not only at the presidential level, but locally. There were some protests last night. And today we're going to have our guests are Kierran Young, political operative and voter rights advocate, activist, as well as Dannys Marrero. He's been covering breaking news for the Pittsburgh Current, and before that, he's been covering breaking news across the city on his own, doing a fantastic job. So we're actually glad to have him also as part of the team. So let's just, also, new edition of the Pittsburgh Current should be in your mailboxes now. And please check pittsburghcurrent.com where we're going to be updating and running. We'll have updated coverage as it becomes available. And also, if you see my head turn to the left, it's because we do have CNN on live to bring you the latest as that happens as well. But let's start, Kierran. Let's talk about. Let me just get your sort of general thoughts on the election that is unfolded before us. I mean, so we Tuesday night, I know a lot of people went to bed thinking that, Trump was on his way to march through, to a second term. But I think that everyone was surprised when they woke up Tuesday morning, except for those people, myself, I know you, and of course the Democrats and the Biden camp, that this was the strategy all along, to really push for advanced voting. And so that's why we saw the massive change. So what did you see, and how did you see it working?
So in Pennsylvania, this is our first mail-in ballot election. And by that, I mean first mail-in ballot general election. We did it in the primary, but we also see lower participation in primaries as opposed to general elections in presidential cycles.
Right.
So this is the first time that Pennsylvania voters have had the option to vote for almost a month before Election Day. So as we saw, the Democratic Party and affiliated groups, including some of the C3s and C4s, were all pushing Democratic-leaning voters to vote early and to vote by mail or vote at the early voting locations that were provided in some of the major counties in the state of Pennsylvania, or I'm sorry, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I think that effort paid off, and we're seeing it right now with the vote count coming out of Allegheny County and Philadelphia, and it looks like Joe Biden is going to win.
Yeah, it certainly looks like, and as I wrote yesterday in the Pittsburgh Current, it looks like that Joe Biden has a real clear path to victory. And Kierran, one thing that I've heard people say is that there are several things with this that I've noticed, and I've actually heard other people talk about. I'm not really sure how to take it or what exactly to make of it. What do you, in terms of, if we're talking about a mandate, or we're talking about, I've heard some people say that basically the way that this election has gone down is kind of a repudiation of the far left. And I don't know that I see it like that, but I guess they're saying that because Trump still had a massive outpouring of support, record numbers of voters. What do you make of that in terms of the Biden presidency as it were to move forward, in terms of how does it play out for Democrats, I guess, is what I'm thinking, the Democratic Party as a whole?
So I think the continued inter-party civil war that we've seen happen over the past two cycles will continue to happen in subsequent primaries in 2022.
Yeah.
I know we're going to have a hotly contested governor's race and a United States Senate race in 2022. So I can see those being hotbeds for progressives versus the establishment of the party. So as we move forward, I think you're going to continue to see that fight for the direction of the party and where we go on a substantive policy basis, and that's going to play itself out at the state level, fighting over congressional seats, fighting over Senate seats, and I think that's going to continue. I don't think Joe Biden getting elected by a narrow margin, makes the progressive wing of the party think that they're any less powerful than they are, because they are very powerful.
Right. What about just the thought that there was the plan to flip the Senate, which I still don't think is out of reach yet. There are still a couple of races, and then also to build an even greater advantage in the House. That didn't quite go as well, I think, as Democrats had hoped and thought it would. What do you owe that to? Do you owe that to the number of Trump voters who came out?
Um, Everything's different when the leader of a party is on the ballot. You saw the same thing with Obama. People would win in places that they wouldn't normally be able to win when the president was on the ballot, when President Obama was on the ballot the 2 times that he was on the ballot. But in midterms, the Democratic Party would get beat relatively handedly in a lot of those same areas.
Right.
So it's just a matter of he drives turnout in areas. He drives turnout in areas that Democrats usually would win, and he drives people out, and they end up voting for other Republicans.
And I was going to ask you about this later when we talk about local races, but while we're there, let's just talk about it just for a second. Where did you see that happen in local races? And in terms of statewide, I would think, my own opinion, and you would have a better idea than me. I would think in a midterm year, if Josh Shapiro were running against Heather Heidelbaugh,
he would have crushed her, no question,
correct,
because
right?
the voter registration that the advantage that the Democrats had would actually mean something. But also, Sean Parnell wouldn't have done as well as he did in a year like 2018. So I think it's a lot about President Trump being on the ballot and people coming out who don't normally vote. Excuse me. Some of whom are registered Democrats, and some of whom decide to go down the ballot and vote for other Republicans. So
what about then too? Another one I think that I noticed was Jessica Benham. She had a Republican challenger. Not that it was close, but in terms of where it would have been, like you said, in a midterm year, to get 11,000 votes in that district for a Republican. And granted, that was the Harry Reid Shaw.
Yeah, let's also take that with a grain of salt. Harry Reid Shaw was a guy who opposed the integration of schools.
Right.
In Western Pennsylvania.
Except for his support of unions, Harry Reid Shaw was a far right Republican.
Trump Republican too, man.
Yeah.
So to be surprised that a Republican would get 11,000 votes, I'm not surprised at all.
Okay.
But the vote totals across the board, you saw incredible turnout across the region. You're seeing almost 100,000 votes. Almost 60, 70,000 votes in some of these House districts, and there's supposed to only be 70 or 80,000 people in these districts. So, you're seeing a lot of ballots being returned, and very, very high numbers of the eligible population actually voting.
So let's go back to election night. Let's go back to Tuesday night. I have a couple questions about this. So we have Joe Biden come out when it's obvious we're not going to have any. But it's obvious we're not going to get a result and it should have been obvious to anyone who knows who's followed even with half an eye at an election. There was nothing going to be concretely decided on Tuesday night. Not without a lot of strange things happening in terms of states that were able to report early. So Joe Biden comes out, makes a very measured statement about he thinks that they have the votes to win this election. And in fact, very emphatically said that they have the votes to win Pennsylvania, which we'll get to in a second. Then Donald Trump comes out and just goes about as batshit crazy as Donald Trump could go, and just he starts yelling about we're winning, and then all of a sudden they just stop, and then all these ballots. Where are all these ballots coming from? So two things. I think it's just one question on Donald Trump's part, because I sometimes have a hard time disseminating, because he'll lie about anything and everything to give himself an advantage. So was he just trying to whip up his base to put the idea in that this election was being quote unquote stolen? or does he really not understand the process? He's saying, where did these votes come from? Does he really not understand the process? But did he not understand the Democratic, not even understand the Democratic strategy? It's just basic knowledge of how elections work. What is your thought on that? Because
Well, I mean, this is actually kind of a weird election because in a lot of states, people have no excuse mail ballot voting for the first time.
Sure.
And in places like Pennsylvania, where normally we would have known who was going to win the state by 12 o'clock at the latest,
right.
with maybe some stragglers not coming in until morning. But you would usually have 95% of the vote in by midnight.
Right.
And that just is not the case when you have to scantron these mail ballots.
Right.
So a lot of people who have historically watched these type of things sit there and go, okay, it's 11 o'clock, the results are in, I won,
right.
Stop counting.
Right.
Well, I mean, you can't do that because you gave everyone no excuse absentee voting.
Right.
And there are millions of ballots piled up in offices.
Right. So do you think that that night, do you think the president was just trying to whip up his base, or do you think in his case,
might have been a little column A and a little column B, trying to whip up your base, but still kind of ignorant of how the process works?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely, I'll jump in real quick on that one. I definitely do think that because Donald Trump, yes, he goes on his tangents and he really has control over his supporters. But this is also that if he knows he's going to lose, he's going to try to give the Democrats as much damage as they possibly can before he does leave office. Because then what happens? Biden can't pass most of his at least most progressive pieces of legislation that he's trying to pass.
Right.
And then comes 2024 and they're like, oh, he failed. Let's go back to where we were before.
Right.
So if he's trying to, if he sees himself losing, which I think we all can see him losing now,
right.
He's trying to kind of give himself a plan B, which would be 2024.
Right. And I think you're right, but it's just, man, when you look at just the way he says things. For example, he talks about at one point his supporters are in Detroit outside the windows, pounding on the windows where they're counting the votes and yelling, stop the count, stop the count. And then in Arizona, they're outside screaming, count the votes, count the votes. And I think this is probably the perfect sort of picture to paint the Donald Trump presidency of just the absolute contradictions in everything he does. And it was a surreal scene, I think. Kierran?
So in Arizona, he wants to count the votes because those are mostly votes of whites and Latinos. There are very few black people out there. So he feels that he has a better chance of winning a state that's dominated by white and Latino voters.
Yeah.
But on the other side of things, in Michigan, they're protesting in Wayne County, which I believe is around 55% black.
Correct.
They have a county executive that is black. They have a district attorney that is black. As you know from covering a recent story up there in Wayne County. So you really have to think, is it because the votes that are left are in a certain place where they elect Democrats and vote, and there are a lot of black people who vote? Maybe.
But it's the most incredulous thing to me, and again, these are things for 4 years that I've been banging my head against the wall because you say to his supporters, can't you see how crazy this is? And it's just, they've been able to turn a blind eye to that and just follow him. I mean, it is really he's really more of a cult leader than a political leader, I think. And so everything that's gone on because of this, Trump protesters have been out. And Dannys, you were covering on last night. You were out covering a protest downtown. Talk a little bit about the protest and what you saw, what people were saying on both sides.
All right, yeah. So last night when people realized, hey, nothing's gonna be called either, but they did see the push from Donald Trump trying to quote unquote take the election, make counting stop in some states, and because of the fact that he did have lawsuits already in the Rust Belt states, and even sent his law team and Rudy Giuliani over there to Philly to counter or contest, should I say, some votes, people were like, hold up, this man's trying to do something that, is undemocratic. So people did take it to the streets. They were all at the city county building. And there were actually 2 protests. Both were kind of about the same thing. One was about counting all the votes, which obviously sounds exactly what it's like. People, even in PA, it said that it won't take until Friday to count every single votes. But Trump wants to stop that. So they were kind of pushing out there, wanting to make that happen. Now, the most eventful one was the one that came after that. It was actually a coalition of a bunch of local organizations and different political parties. Like even the Green Party of Allegheny County was there. And some other worker unions were down there as well being represented. And they were like, don't let Donald Trump steal the election. That was kind of like the energy that was going to be being given out. So most of these individuals didn't trust the establishment when it came to the Democrats being able to like hold on if for some reason Trump kept contesting these, because of the same thing that happened in 2000 where the Democrats kind of like let it go because of what the court said. So people now know that because the Supreme Court nominee that they push through in a few days, I think it was last week or the week before, they don't have faith in the court, and if that were to happen, they think it's going to go to Donald Trump. So these people were very angry, very vocal about it, and they were making sure that, hey, if we see that something's going down, we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that was kind of what was going on. There were, I want to say, about 200 people down there, and they were marching around. Obviously, there were some disturbances, which we'll get to in a little bit. But majority of these people just didn't trust the establishment because even here in local races, we see, yes, the Democratic Party is obviously the establishment of Pittsburgh. City council and the mayor have always been that for the past like 50, 60 years plus. But well, yeah, even more years. I've been in Pittsburgh for like 4 years, so I'm still kind of brushing through the history. But no, it's like these people do not trust the establishment, and they do know that, hey, we have to be out here pushing, because the Democrats are they fold easily, and they don't want that to happen this time around.
And so, yeah, and so then you talked a second ago. So things did get a little heated, and for a little bit of background, so if you were following again throughout the day on Tuesday, any local media, there were some issues at polling places. In one particular case, a poll worker. I just have my notes here on that. A poll worker was dismissed because they were, and this is from a public source. The county also reported that poll worker Brittany Acosta was removed from a voting location on Ellsworth Avenue after other workers said she was causing a disturbance, taking pictures and video of polling place activities, and looking at voters' ballots prior to those being scanned. She was thrown out and then later reinstated by election court judge John McVeigh. And then she went back to the polling place, started this nonsense again, and was kicked out finally once and for all. So let's fast forward to last night, Donnie. She shows up at the protest, correct?
Yes, and I'm trying not to laugh, but
no, it's hilarious. No, it's ridiculously. It's funny in such a ridiculous manner. Let's go ahead. Jake, go ahead. We're gonna have Jake go ahead and play the video, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
At the polls, because WSA has a great story on it. That's awesome. That's great. Fuck yeah! So you admit it. So they did my story. So you did do voter intimidation at the polls. Fuck yes. So you, a Nazi, did voter intimidation at the polls. Brittany Acosta that works at Brookdale Living Center. No. At the polls.
That was just the greatest payoff was when she named her, like she had admitted who she was. She basically admitted, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, she admitted she was quote unquote a Nazi engaging in voter intimidation. But then when she sort of said who she was, where she worked, that was just that deadpan no. But so she was talking about actively, she was at the polls to actively engage in voter intimidation. Is that what you got out of that?
Yeah, so they had published a story earlier that day, and obviously these people that come out to the protest, they're very politically active and they're keeping track because they know what's at stake right now.
Sure.
So these people were already aware that there's been some people out there being poll watchers and doing sketchy things, or even poll workers. And when this individual came around, because she came around for the first protest, and she walked around and she just yelled out, Biden is a liar, but she was very quickly dismissed by these people.
Sure.
So they didn't really pay that much attention to her. However, when she came back the second time around, this one she was a lot more vocal.
Right.
Before that video was taken, they actually had marched. They were marching through, and when they were occupying the intersection of Grant and 6th Avenue,
Right.
that's when majority of the chaos started, because she kept yelling and yelling. It was mostly profanities about, female genitalia that I'm just not
Right.
necessarily repeat because it's not proper.
Jake, do you have that photo of her getting? Jake, do you have that photo of her getting up and because she was going right up into protesters' face, correct? And
she was in people's faces. It was not cute. And the photo, I mean, I kept snapping photos. I'm like, this we gotta watch this one.
Yeah.
But no, so she was like getting in people's faces, just constantly talking about, Trump and screw Biden, and just the female genitalia that she kept asking how it tasted and whatnot. And yeah,
Kierran, it was a crazy scene, man. It was not.
I'm trying not to. Exactly, I'm trying not to.
Wow.
Without saying it.
Wow.
Right.
But you've piqued my interest.
Yeah, Kierran was looking a little bored, and I was like, "Hey."
Yeah, so she was yelling this constantly. It was about for a straight hour that she was just harassing, to a certain degree, these protesters, because she would get so close to these people. And that's when we went back to the county building, that the same people that were wearing black, the kind of protest guardians, as they call themselves, like the
yes.
And they were like, wait a minute, what's wrong with you? Like, just go away. Pittsburgh police actually was in the scene right before, and they were kind of making sure that they would split up, because tensions were very high between these two parties, I'll say. And when Pittsburgh police separated them, the Acosta just kept circling around. And once she made she circled on one time, they all kind of circled her, and that's when that video took place, because they were looking and like, wait a minute, we kind of recognized her because she took off her mask a few times.
Oh, right.
And I had searched on Google. I'm like, wait, trying to confirm her identity, because I just can't go by word. And somebody actually was like, wait, I know her, I'm gonna call her phone. And yeah, her phone rang. And that's when I was like, okay. Yeah, no, so I was like, wait, I know her. And they called her, and yeah, it was confirmed that this individual was Brittany Acosta. And that's when they kind of called her out on her things, and she was first saying yes, it was all me. But you saw when they name dropped her and said where she worked, she was like, hold up, back up. I deny everything.
All of a sudden, common sense smacked her in the face.
How is this woman not in jail? Has this been brought to Steve Zapala's attention?
Well, I mean,
good question. I don't know. I don't know what they. I don't know what the process is on that. But I think the fact that McVeigh allowed her to come back into the polling place.
She's an admitted Nazi engaging in voter intimidation. I mean,
right.
You got that on tape, apparently.
Yeah. I did get it on tape. I was like, whoa. And then when I was filming her the first time, which I thought this part was hilarious though. And so I'm filming her when she's obviously agitating, and she starts singing to me, and I'm just like, I'm gonna cut this video. Next thing I know, the American Idol thing is DM'd to me, and I was like,
yeah.
I should have kept.
So
recording.
For just the quick background on that is, several years ago, when American Idol did auditions here, she apparently had traveled around trying to get on American Idol, to the point that she was banned by producers from showing up at American Idol auditions. So apparently she's still looking for that music contract, the record contract. If anybody wants to give her a call, Dannys can get you her contact.
How much you want to bet she sings country music?
No, she was singing Lady Gaga. She was singing Shallow. And let me tell you something.
She needs to get into country music. If she's a Nazi engaging in voter suppression, she needs to get into country music. Or if you guys ever heard of Johnny Rebel?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, she needs to make music like that. They'll love that.
Yeah, there's a huge niche market for racist country music, other than the regular country music that is usually racist as well.
It's just a tiny bit racist. The Johnny Rebel type music is like overtly racist. Like we're in your face. Like, have you ever heard Coontown?
I don't know about that. I've heard a song that I'm not going to say the name of, but
there's some real good ones, man. Some real good ones that can't be said in mixed company.
Sort of crazy it's crazy niche that she can maybe.
There's one about how Jesse Jackson shows up. We're just waiting for Jesse Jackson to show up here in Pennsylvania because somebody's being disenfranchised.
It's getting crazy. So Kierran, how do you see this? I do want to point out that so there are the couple of sort of the two strange sort of states where Biden is not only competitive, but he's really close to picking up, are Georgia and Arizona. And these are two states that you're familiar with, both from you've worked in both states, you've got family in Georgia. Talk to me a little bit about how this came about. And do you think that there is, at the end of the day, do you think that realistically that that Joe Biden can pick up Arizona and Georgia?
Well, Arizona, yes, I think that's trending in the Democrats' direction, partially because of the way that he treated John McCain.
Right.
John McCain is a hero in Arizona, and from my time out there, a lot of people really respect him, including the Democrats, the way he worked for the state. So Donald Trump, making fun of him and, talking about him in a disparaging way, I think a lot of John McCain's voters decided to side with Democrats, especially when his family, started to say, well, we can't even stomach voting for this man.
Right.
The guy wasn't even allowed at John McCain's funeral.
Right. Yeah. It really is a thing. Like John McCain got him twice. First, he's the guy who killed the healthcare, his attempt to getting rid of the healthcare bill, and then his voters came to his defense here in Arizona. So it's kind of a neat. There's lots of little neat things. At one point, first of all, again, I love the fact that Trump was winning so big, and he just watched it all eroded. Like I felt like that was the perfect kind of punishment. The only other thing I sort of wish would have happened, and of course it was never going to happen. I wish that Donald Trump would have lost the presidency but won the popular vote, because I would have loved for him to to see that. Like,
I got more votes than last time. What do you mean I lost?
Last 4 years ago that was crazy, and this year
we need to that would have immediately caused him to be like, let's get rid of the electoral college. It's over. This is not fair.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about it, about it, I don't even think that that's possible. There's always more Democratic people who are signed up to vote than Republicans. So unless majority of Democrats don't show up, that is not possible.
And again, I was kind of go ahead, Kierran.
We're packed into certain areas, and this goes back to something that you asked me about Georgia, is that you have a lot of people moving from the East Coast to Georgia, and in Georgia, you're seeing a lot of younger people, moving there, as well as Texas, but Texas is a lot further off, especially with President Trump on the ballot. But Northern Democrats moving to Southern states is causing a change in the politics of Southern states. So I really do think that in years to come, you'll see states like North Carolina, and Georgia, and probably Texas all go for the Democrats because of changing demographics.
And you worked in Texas late last year and early this year. We look at the numbers now. How close are Democrats to an eventual takeover of Texas?
From looking at the numbers last night, a lot further away than we thought. I mean, Beto O'Rourke lost by 200,000 votes.
Right.
So you think that during a presidential year you can drive up your numbers, but even more, Trump voters showed up, so the margin was increased, and I don't think Joe Biden was helped by the fact that they ran ads very early saying that he was a socialist.
Right. Which is
yeah,
the same thing that, yeah, and I was gonna say, and adding on to that, yes, because the whole attack on them being socialists did affect them in Florida as well, and that's why they lost Florida at the end of the day. Because all these things for months went unanswered by the Democrat side of, oh, we're socialists, like, and none of them said anything to say, oh, hold up, that's not true.
Yeah.
So that definitely did hurt them in Florida. That's why they lost the state. And in Texas, to add on, it's not just like, yes, it's changing demographic, but and part of that demographic would be the Latino votes in the Sun Belt, right? So the Democrats still haven't figured out, quote unquote, how to drive that Latino vote out there,
Right.
because they have to understand, and myself as a Latino, I can speak upon this. We don't vote as a collective. We're all from different, even though, yes, we're Latinos,
Correct.
we're not from the same area. Like, I could say, just to put it into perspective, in Florida, right, it's a lot of either Cuban Americans or Puerto Ricans, right? So whenever Cuban Americans are a majority in Florida, just like it is this election cycle, they tend to vote red. Whenever the demographics change, there's a giant influx of Puerto Ricans that are a lot more liberal, those they vote blue. The same thing will be happening in the Sunbelt states, so like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, well, New Mexico, ignore that one, but like Arizona and like Nevada and those states right there, right? So some come from Mexico, but also the Southern American countries are also there. So all that different demographic for where they're coming from does definitely affect how they're gonna vote. Mostly because some of these countries are a lot more religious than others, and that is kind of the biggest factor for these people.
Yeah, and that's one thing I saw on CNN the other night, and you just said this. It was the exact same thing. They had one of the pundits was a Latina woman, and they asked her why does Joe Biden not do well with Latinos in Miami, but he did well with Latinos here? And she just kind of looked at her like she was the dumbest person on the face of the earth. They're because Latino doesn't mean one thing. It's it's different people from different places, and do you think that the Democratic Party finally noticed that, or do you think that hopefully there's a change in the way that they
they're definitely realizing that, hey, we're doing this wrong, because they constantly, yes, the Democratic Party has been carried by the Black population has honestly been carrying the Democratic Party. We know that. And the Latinos are not saying, oh my God, we're going to be the ones to do that next. They haven't necessarily gotten out to us because the Democrats are always so focused on the Black population, right? Which does in fact take into consideration that Latinos are, as I said, some of them are very religious, so they're going to obviously tend to vote Republican, because that's kind of like their biggest thing, like faith in Latino population in some of these countries is their biggest priority. So no, I don't think that Democrats have gotten it just yet, but I do definitely think that they have started to realize, hey, we're doing something wrong. We have to fix it.
And Kierran, what do you think? And again, I'm gonna feel like that the person on CNN the other night, who says, how did Trump make gains within with Black voters? Again, it wasn't.
He took credit for Obama. He took credit for Obama's
jobs.
Yeah, jobs and incarceration reform.
Yeah.
So, and then he decided to cozy up to every major Black entertainer that would decide to come to the White House, i.e. Kanye.
We don't talk about Kanye. We do not talk about.
We have to talk about Kanye.
So yeah, and he got like 36,000 votes. You know what I mean? Like he was doing all right. If you add all the votes from one state and put them in a place like Maine in one congressional district or like a House district or something, I don't know. He got 30,000-40,000 votes. So I think that people like that are wooed by shiny objects, and you have those in every community who are just like, hey, look at what we got for you over here. And then those people run over there and they say, see how nice this is? See how nice we got it over here? Meanwhile, other people are looking like, nah, that ain't it.
No, right. That ain't it.
That ain't it. It's just, no, it's not. That's not. It's like Ice Cube running around saying that he couldn't get an audience with Joe Biden's campaign, and then Cedric Richmond comes out and goes, dude, I'm a leading member of the Black Caucus. Where's this call been? I've been waiting for it. It just comes off as disingenuous when a lot of these, wealthy celebrities come out and say, hey, you know, we should support this guy because tax cuts, and you know, he's done this to help certain people get out of prison. And it just, I mean, it's basically, let's take care of the richest black people, and let's take care of the black people we think that everybody wants us to take care of, and then let's forget about all those people in the middle who are struggling just to make ends meet, trying to live their life the right way. And there's a lot of that in the Democratic Party, and they don't invest enough in talking, especially in the Democratic Party, in talking to the middle of the black community. It's always the most super marginalized, or let's try to help black business owners, but it's never let's help, you know, black young people start their own business,
Right.
or let's help, you know, black young people become homeowners when they're, you know, saddled with debt so that they can reinvest in their own community. The Democratic Party doesn't talk about those things, so it gives a person like Trump the opportunity to say, hey, they're not doing anything for you, but I let 5 people out of prison and I gave these rich black people a tax cut, so y'all should vote for me.
Exactly. And I mean, literally in the waning days of the race, and 50 Cent comes out and you know, says, don't vote for Biden. And literally he said, it's because I don't want to pay 62% in taxes on my millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Start offshoring your money, 50 Cent. I mean, everybody does it. Get you an LLC set up in the Cayman Islands, and then, you know, wire your money down there.
Right.
Literally what blows my mind about hearing wealthy black people complain about the tax structure is if they would just look at how their white friends do it, they would actually be able to keep more of their money. Just get an accountant and a tax attorney like everybody else does.
All right. So let's talk we want to talk about local races, but just finally, what do you think we can expect in the next few days? I mean, Trump has filed countless lawsuits in every state from Wisconsin to Georgia, and of course here in Pennsylvania. What can we expect from that? I mean, from working from 2000, you know, the winner of the race always has the advantage, I think, in these lawsuits. That's what we learned in 2000. So what can we expect?
So my belief is that Joe Biden is going to win Pennsylvania, he's going to win Arizona, and he's going to win Nevada, which will make any lawsuit irrelevant. We're there. It's the reason why you saw Rudy Giuliani standing in Philadelphia screaming and yelling with Donald Trump's son, Eric, is because they really don't have a leg to stand on. They don't have an army of lawyers, you know, mobilizing around the country from reputable law firms. Right. They've got people who run, you know, fly-by-night legal practices, just like, hey, yeah, I'll get in there and right. fight for you.
And they're out of money. I mean, the Trump campaign is out of money at this point.
So you can expect to not get paid.
Right.
That's
Which
the other
is the Donald Trump signature for the last 40 years.
Well, what about the bus company up in Butler? You know, did you ever do any digging into that to find out whether or not they got their money?
That's a good point. Yeah, I have not.
There are a lot of people around here, vendors that they've used, and I use, you know, Democrats and Republicans for things like stages and sound systems and things like that. We use the same vendors. I think it would be interesting if you went around and started calling some of these people.
What does Trump owe?
Yeah, what does Trump owe? Has he paid you? I mean, it's because I know for a fact that a jumbotron to put a 20 by 20 jumbotron at one of those rallies costs about $5,000 for an 8-hour period. Right. You multiply that by 10 of them that they had up on that airfield, right. The stage, that's a couple $100,000. And if a local company was contracted to do that, I guarantee you they got stiffed.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely take a look into that for sure. So let's talk local for a minute. And let's start with the referendum on the ballot to change the home rule charter of Pittsburgh to grant more powers to the Citizens Police Review Board. The review board was created in '97, and I actually started working in the Pittsburgh area about 2.5 years later. And I can tell you that at that time, and up until yesterday, basically, the Citizens Police Review Board didn't have. They had power. They had a subpoena power was the most powerful thing that they had. Unfortunately, they couldn't compel an officer to testify because of the union contract, and they would get protections from the union. There was nothing that compelled them to testify, nothing that even compelled them to cooperate. So the new review board, just the highlights of the new review board referendum is, and more than 76% of voters, more than 76% of voters supported this. But officers must now comply with an investigation. And
it's amazing that you didn't have. It's amazing that you didn't have to comply with an investigation before.
No, I know, and
we call that obstruction if you're a civilian,
right? And I've covered dozens of. I'll be completely honest. I've covered dozens of police review board hearings over the past 20 years, and I honestly stopped probably more than 5 years ago because honestly, nothing came of it. It really was the cop. If the cop showed up, they would sit there. One officer I remember sat there and basically listened to music on his headphones, and he had a lawyer there, didn't address it, wouldn't answer any questions, wouldn't take the stand for, wouldn't do anything, and so it really was kind of a sham. So if this can be used effectively, I do think that that's a power, and we can talk about what kind of power we think this is going to give them. That does feel to me to be a power that could help the CPRB if it's actually enforced in the right way. And then the police department, police bureau also has to cooperate with the controller's office and the CPRB to audit the city police department. So I'll ask both you guys, what do you make of, number one, the margin? I don't think the margin surprises me, the 76% support. But what do you think of the legislation and its strength?
Who goes first? Okay, yeah, I'll go first then. So regarding the amount of support that it got during the election, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Sure. For the past few months, people have been out there. Actually, for the past years, if you kind of think about it, they've been out there protesting. When it came to police violence, and police overreach, when it came to the lives of some Black individuals that have been lost. So they've been out there fighting this for a long, long time. However, for the past couple of months, 5 or 6 months, the protests have been non-stop. So before it was that there was only a protest when something would happen, something unfortunate, a tragedy obviously would happen. Right. That's when the protest would be about. But for the past couple of months, this whole summer, since May, almost every single day, and if not, at least twice a week, 3 times a week. So the amount of support that it got shouldn't be a surprise. However, as I said right before we started this is kind of just like baby teeth. There's nothing real of substance, right, in my opinion, yet, because the cops are still gonna have qualified immunity. And then the Section 508 of the Pennsylvania law, I forgot how you properly say that, but yeah, Section 508. If people know whatever I'm saying about, but these two things are gonna still protect cops in a way that is unjust to the system, right, bringing justice to whatever it is that's happening. Because qualified immunity, they can just say, "Oh, I didn't know," and then they're good to go. And then Section 508 just lets them be like, "Well, I thought that I could shoot him because I felt some type of way." Right, so right. Those two things are the biggest things to do. So yes, the movement to give the Citizens Review Board more power, yes, it's on the right direction, but we're not there yet because you still have these two giant looming things that protect cops not only here in Allegheny County in the city of Pittsburgh, but also nationwide.
Right. And Dannys, you have almost daily contact with protesters and the folks who sort of call these things and lead these things. What has been their reaction? Maybe I don't know how much you've gotten since the election, but what is their reaction to the change to the law that was proposed? Do they think it has any real effect? I mean, I know there have been calls for more substantive police reform, but what is the thought there from the protest organizations?
So from what I got last night, which was the first time that I was able to obviously see them pass the election, they are not necessarily content with what's happening still, because as I mentioned before, there's nothing, and you just mentioned it right now, that there's no actual substance to it. Yes, they got a little bit more that they can do, but they don't have anything that's going to be like, hey, you have to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we need to get this done. So people don't feel like it's enough yet. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. Prior to the election, everyone was saying, hey, Citizens Review Board needs to be all of them, democratically elected. It has to be, and also like the police chief needs to be democratically elected. People are pushing here in the city of Pittsburgh and also nationwide, as we've seen throughout the protests all of the summer, that yes, step in the right direction, but not enough.
Kierran?
So, Dannys, nowhere in this country does anybody elect a police chief. That's an absolutely terrible idea. Sheriff, yes, I get that, but a police chief at the elected whims of the people. I'm cool.
I'm quoting the people.
I'm cool. I'm cool with an appointed police chief as long as there's oversights in place. But also, I really do think that what you stated earlier, Charlie, about the contract is the problem. It's not the Citizens Police Review Board. So fixing the review board does not fix the problem that we have with the contract. It doesn't give the review board power to terminate officers. It just gives the review board the power to subpoena people. I mean, we saw the review board had all the evidence that it needed to say that officers in the Leon Ford case were wrong. Right. But again, nothing happened to those officers. Those 3 officers are still on the force. So subpoenaing somebody and making them actually testify doesn't really do anything for me if I can't terminate them, which is why you hear a lot of people, to Dannys' point, I don't know if I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry.
You're doing great.
To his point, that we have a problem with oversight, right? You have a problem with the police contract. You have a problem with police officers not being held accountable, and the people want accountability. And I also believe that people would like an elected review board. Here's a simple solution. Here's something that I support, and I know other organizations around the country are going to be pushing for, and I hope that somebody would run on it for mayor of the city of Pittsburgh. Let's abolish the city of Pittsburgh's police department and bring back the police department as a new entity like they did in Camden, New Jersey, with an elected police board that picks who the chief is. So it's not an elected chief, but the board elects a chief. And every 4 years, like city council, those board members would go up in front of their constituents and people would be able to decide whether or not they thought that person was representing their interests. I think that the idea of adding more elected accountability is right on point. I don't necessarily know if the best idea is to elect the police chief. I think you'll end up rotating through a lot of police chiefs really fast.
And Kierran, something you and I have talked about a lot. So not that I even want to look forward to another election, but the mayor's race in the city of Pittsburgh, a lot of that is going to be a referendum on how Bill Peduto has dealt with the police force. And
it's his force now. He broke it.
Yeah. And after making a lot of promises, which we won't get into all that now, but a ton of promises were made. And I think a ton of promises were also broken.
It sounds like you need to have me back on in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or a month, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, we should talk about that at length. But but that's where there's going to be accountability, is when Bill Peduto comes, I think, back up for re-election.
And I think you're going to need a candidate who's going to propose some ideas like the ones that I just proposed.
Right.
Because people are calling for that. More elected accountability, and also the contract is the reason that you can't terminate police officers. As much as Bill Peduto doesn't want to tell people that, because then he'll realize, then people would ask, well, why would you keep signing that contract?
Right.
But the contract is the reason. It's not the fleeing felon law like Summer wants to change, which is a great place to start. But in some of these cases, impunity is written into their contracts.
Yeah.
So, are we going to pivot to the local elections next?
So that's where we're going. Yeah. So that's where we're going to wrap up, is we're going to talk a little bit about the local elections. Kierran, what surprises did you see on the ballot? Let's start with one that I wanted to ask you about, which was, are you surprised by the result with Pam Ivino, the state senator?
Oh no, Pam Ivino is the least inspiring person that the Democrats could have run. And 2 years ago, I said it. She has the charisma of a used dish rag, and it took every person in the state laying down, knocking doors, every organization dumping millions of dollars for them to win that seat. You know, I am not surprised at all that she lost to another military veteran. It actually, I think it should tell the Democratic Party, try to find more charismatic young people. You know, running an old white woman because she's a military veteran and she lost to Connor and she supported him is just the stupidest thing in the world. And I blame Fitzgerald and I blame Jay Costa for that. I mean, they are the ones that and Nancy Mills, they're the ones that laid down and decided that instead of, you know, Bob Solomon or Olivia Benson, that we, who I thought was the best candidate, that we should run a woman with zero charisma and who could not connect with people. And in a lot of cases, in spaces where I met her repeatedly, couldn't even remember who I was.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that she lost to me. The real surprises that I saw are the Dermody loss.
Yeah.
That was pretty surprising. I mean, you know, he's a member of leadership. Petraka losing. Not really surprised by Skopov or Knoll or Lissa Geiger. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not really surprised by any of those at all. Those were going to be tough districts. And in Geiger Schulman's case, I always thought it was interesting that we were running a woman against a woman. There was no real. In a lot of cases, it starts to feel in some of these suburban districts when you run a white woman against a white woman that the Democrats basically just want you to pick their version of the same person who's already in the office. So you're not giving people a whole lot of contrast. But, you know, Pam Snyder is down like by 400 with some outstanding mail-in ballots. Rob Matzey was in a tighter race than I thought he would be with Rico Elmore.
Yeah.
You know, Daryl Metcalf held on by a much larger and won by a much bigger margin than I ever expected.
Well, so a lot of that, and I don't know, a lot of reports have put that Metcalf won. That basically that Smith only got like 6,000 votes, but that's actually not true because Butler County had broken machines, and so a lot of those votes didn't come in until yesterday. Now, listen, he still lost by probably 6,000 votes, but he got 17,000 votes in a district.
So those initial numbers that I saw were way off.
So that was one dump, and so those initial numbers were very early. In fact, I want to.
It's like all of Metcalf's vote came in right at once.
You're right. And so here's the breakdown of that race. Metcalf got 26,281 votes. 5,000 of those came by mail. Daniel Smith got 16,314 votes. Nearly 10,000 of those came from mail-in voting. So again, we're coming back around to the strategy of Democrats, which was this early mail-in voting, even in this case where, again, but you've got a guy who is running again, despite the fact that Daryl Metcalf may be, the devil's ass hair, which I have personal vendettas, obviously, but
didn't he get you fired once?
That's the rumor. That's the rumor. But he really ran a different election too. He didn't spend any money, and of course, we ran the story. Please go back to the Pittsburgh Current and read the story of Daryl Metcalf's secret office. Because
what's he doing in that secret office? Are there any hidden ballots? We need to make sure that there are no ballots in his secret office. That's what
I said to someone. I said they probably went to count the rest of the ballots in Daryl's secret office.
Yeah,
and that's how he came out. So again, we're seeing that, was it a blue wave? Not in all cases, but this is a case where the strategy really did, and I'd have to look, but I think Daniel Smith ran better than he did last time. And so, it's there are just some people in Butler County who were never going to vote for a Democrat, regardless of what they bring to the table and regardless of who they're running against. So really quick, Kierran, anything else? Is there anything, Sean Parnell, Connor Lamb, that race was, I had been told, and I talked to people, that race shouldn't even have been close. It was very close. And again, that's owed to the Trump factor in bringing out voters. Am I correct?
I believe so. But the real thing that gets me is the Pam Ivino race. I mean, Guy Reschenthaler didn't lift a finger for Devlin, and Devlin still beat her by 9,000 votes.
Right.
I mean, and the people in that district love Guy Reschenthaler.
Right.
And he was still able to win without any help from Guy. It just goes to show you how weak the person that we put up was. But also, you know, on the other side of that, it does show you with the red wave that we saw, you know, especially in around Pittsburgh,
right.
You know, that, you know, Sean Parnell overperformed, but if Connor Lamb wasn't as good of a candidate as he is,
right,
he wouldn't have been able to win. Remember, he won in a Republican plus 20 district, and he beat a Republican incumbent in a Republican plus 5 district.
Yeah.
And, you know, he held on to that same district while Trump was on the ballot. So I think, you know, it just goes to show you his strength. And, you know, we hear rumors about Connor, you know, eventually ascending to a statewide office. So it looks very good for Congressman Lamb. And he looks to be the star of Western Pennsylvania that has a future on a statewide level.
Yeah. All right. Dannys, Kierran, thank you guys so much for talking with us. And I feel like we're going to be probably having these conversations a lot more often, especially as the protests go, and again as we continue to count votes. Parting thoughts on the elections from both of you, Kierran?
So my parting thought would be that the Democrats were able to win on a national level, and that's my prediction here on Thursday at 11:30. But you know, they were not able to make the gains that they wanted to in the House and in the Senate, which I think make, you know, Tuesday a loss for them. Winning the presidency really wasn't going to be enough. They really did need to win the United States Congress, as well as some of the state houses. And as you can see from some of the results that we just talked about around here, it was a real bloodbath for the Democrats.
Democrats lost leverage. They lost ground.
We lost Democrats in Western Pennsylvania, and Republicans are getting stronger all around Western and Central Pennsylvania as long as Donald Trump's on the ballot. So, you know, we really have to focus on building out the infrastructure. As a consultant and as a campaign operative, we really do need to focus on building out the infrastructure in order to make sure that, you know, we don't lose places that we've had a stronghold on for a while. I think sometimes we just focus too much on the city and don't focus enough on, you know, working some of these rural areas and trying to persuade people. We just write them off. So you end up with people losing, you know, when you don't support a person like Pam Snyder down in Greene County, and there's no real help going her way to try to persuade her voters to vote for her and other Democrats. You know, that's how you end up in a race where, you know, she might lose by 300 or 400 votes.
And Dannys, your parting thoughts on the election?
No, I concur with the statement that was just said. Ultimately, they will win the White House. I do believe that. I see that that's the clearest path possible. Unless Donald Trump somehow pulls up all 4 states that are remaining in the next like, day, but I don't see that happening. So I do think that Joe Biden will win the presidency. But yeah, it's like in regards to local elections, I do think that it was a very big loss to the Democrats because now that since Congress, even though yes they had the majority in the House, they lost people in the House and Congress. I mean, the Senate. If they don't happen to get that majority or at least get a 50-50, then Joe Biden's gonna have a real tough time trying to pass any of his policies in the first, those 100 days that he's probably gonna try to push out as much as possible. He's gonna have a really hard time. But yeah, so we'll see what 2022 has to bring.
All right, Kierran Young, Dannys Marrero, thank you guys so much, and thank you for joining us on the Pittsburgh Current podcast. We will see you online at www.pittsburghcurrent.com for all the latest election news.